I'm trying to get a better sense of dualism at the moment, partly because I've got a paper to deliver at a conference in a couple of months' time, in which I need to talk about dualism. So I'm trying to get my thoughts, if not straight, then in some kind of order around dualism. And there's a few factors or areas of that I'm particularly interested in. One is to do with some kind of putative model for the origins of dualism. And by dualism, I mean Cartesian substance dualism, I guess, something like that. This feeling that we are dual beings. There is kind of a mind and then there is kind of a body, or spirit and matter, or soul and matter, or some version of that. That dual nature, which I guess in modern parlance would be something to do with consciousness and the neural correlates of consciousness. That kind of dual way of looking at the world, which seems to be part of the human condition. And Paul Bloom talks about it quite a lot in Descartes' Baby, where he does refer to us as natural-born dualists, and there seems to be quite a lot of evidence to support that. So I'm trying to think about dualism, and one of the, as I say, one of the ideas I'm kicking around is some kind of putative origins for dualism. It seems quite likely, I guess, that if you were to design, like evolution designed, if you were to design some kind of complex creature, then it would be advantageous if that creature was able to somehow represent the world and represent its position in the world in order to predict and control and have some kind of optimal way of operating in that world. So some kind of software-hardware distinction, I guess, I'm looking at there. So I don't think it's beyond the bounds of possibility that dualism and this idea that there is a kind of self which is rendered in information alongside the self which is rendered in atoms is possible. It would give us a kind of way of being in the world which is more productive, possibly, and adaptive. So let's just assume that as a starting point that there's an evolutionary origin for the dualism that seems to be part of the human condition, related probably to some kind of survival enhancement. If that is the case, then that mental component of that duality would kind of map onto the physical body and the physical body's affordances in relation to the outside world, because after all that would be its purpose. Its purpose would be to ensure the survival of the physical body and to optimize its chances of reproduction and all those kind of things. So it would seem likely that whatever the mapping is, it would be mapped according to those affordances. So the mental component of ourselves, minds, if you like, should have some kind of should be the same shape as our bodies, broadly speaking. And furthermore, should operate at that kind of scale that our body needs to operate in order to survive. There would be no point in having a mind which was capable or had the opportunity to map quantum fluctuations, for example, or map relativistic effects. Our physical bodies don't operate at those scales. There would be no need for our mind to operate at those scales, so they probably wouldn't bother. Okay, so whatever the mind is, it's probably medium-sized, three-dimensional, operating on the surface of a planet amongst other mammals, that kind of thing. Okay, so if you establish the fact that there is a kind of dualism in place, it has evolutionary origins, that its original purpose was to further the survival opportunities for these medium-sized mammals, then what follows from there? Well, I think one of the things that follows from there is the fact that there's a process of kind of identification, for want of a better word, that this mental representation of the body identifies itself with the physical body, obviously. So we feel ourselves to be our body. Actually, I'm not sure if that's quite true, but it seems quite possible that at some point in our evolutionary past, that feeling oneself to be one's body would be implicit. And certainly part of ourselves feels ourselves to be our body. We have this kind of ownership relationship to our body. So we have that. So there is a close mapping, I think, there. And I can call that close mapping identification. We identify ourselves with our body. The second thing in relation to that is there seems to be quite a bit of variation possible within that. I've spoken before about how that identification with the body varies quite a bit. So sometimes we feel ourselves to be located inside our bodies, almost like ghosts in the machine, or drivers of the body as a kind of vehicle. And that's particularly the case, I think, when we're under some kind of stress or under some kind of detached position. So if we're under threat, for example, we seem to retreat inside our bodies and perhaps curl ourselves around our core, that kind of thing, if we're being threatened. Hunch our shoulders, contract ourselves so that we become centrally located. Perhaps even sacrifice parts of our body in order to preserve a more centrally located sense of self. So in those cases, we, instead of identifying with the whole body, we identify with certain parts of it. We locate closer to the heart, or closer to the position behind the eyes, or closer to the core of the body. So that identification is variable. We also seem to have that odd ability to occasionally project ourselves outside of our bodies. And I'm thinking, of course, about out-of-body experiences here, either those ones that are produced through pharmaceuticals or through strange metaphysical practices, but also the ones that you can get quite routinely in labs through virtual reality experiences, that kind of thing, where one is telepresent somewhere else. So whilst there is a clear identification between the experiential self and the body, it is possible for those things to appear detached. It's also possible, I think, for that sense of self to expand and contract. I've already mentioned its contraction under times of stress, but there's also opportunities for it to kind of expand beyond the body. Again, that's often through metaphysical practices, or occasionally through unusual brain states caused by stroke, for example, or again by pharmaceuticals. But also in a more general sense, I think, through empathy, through fellow feeling, through identification with a team or a nation or a group or a family. That may not be total, but there's a sense in which one feels oneself to be extended out. The boundaries of the self, if you like, flow through the boundaries of this physical body and kind of occupy a wider space. So again, that's another sort of property that the self seems to have, this other component in the dual, this spiritual or mental or whatever you want to call it, component of the duality. Okay, let me just review, see what I've got so far. So there's something to do with evolutionary origins of dualism being within a kind of cybernetic command and control mechanism for the physical body. Then it becomes the possibility of this, and there being an identification between the cybernetic control mechanism and the body itself. And then there'd be the possibility of the variation in that identity or identification. So it becomes possible to identify with part of the body, with a location outside of the body, or with an expanded or contracted space inside or outside of the body. These all become possible in that dualistic understanding. Not sure I can get much further with that right now.